But I want to say to your point, Chase, that I found that a lot of jazz musicians feel uncomfortable with any kind of selling or when the minute that you feel like you're doing anything that's promotional oriented, like it just rubs everybody the wrong way and they shut it down. Or even while you're doing it, if you know that you have to do it, even like saying, I have a new album out. You know, artists, David Benoit is a perfect example. He's like, we toured together so many times. David is an amazing musician. Just getting him to say before he plays a song, "This is from my new album." He doesn't like it. It makes him cringe, and I never understood that. Like if you're out there promoting something that you just went in the studio and put your heart and soul into, and you should be proud of it, why don't you talk about it or say something about it that makes you feel good? So that's one thing that I've said to younger musicians, specifically jazz musicians, is to not be afraid to talk about the stuff that you're working on and the things that you want to tell your audience about. Don't feel bad about it. Feel good about it, and let them into your world in more ways. And you don't have to feel like a sellout for doing it. You're actually doing them a service by letting them more into your world. And on that same subject too, I've worked with some younger jazz musicians, mostly turns out to be, if it's at university level or sometimes even high school level, that are more real jazz musicians, more on the lines of traditional jazz. I see them playing on the stage together and nobody is smiling. I mean, they look like they're at a funeral. And I'm like, after the performance, they'll say, "Well, do you have any pointers for us?" And I would say, "Yeah, your playing is great, but your facial expressions suck." I mean, who wants to look at that? The music could be off the charts amazing, right? But if you're doing it on a stage in front of people, and one day we will get that opportunity back, God willing. But if you're on stage and you're in front of people, at least try a little bit to make it entertaining. And I think that that's a very important thing as we're moving forward, is to remember that we are entertainers. We're musicians and we are artists, but we are in that mode. We're there to entertain our audience. So, I mean, the musicians that I look to that are some jazz musicians, some pop, some R&B musicians, they're the ones that really, they embrace that concept from the minute that the show starts, that we are here to entertain you. This is not about us. This is about you.
I think you just nailed it with that last statement. Is a lot of the jazz musicians, when they go to a performance, they're so focused on themselves or their music or their solo coming up or what they're going to play and all of that, and they don't really consider what the audience is thinking or any sort of interaction. So, and I don't think a lot of jazz maybe even started like that, but that's what it seems like a lot of jazz has turned into nowadays, is they're so focused on themselves that there is no connection with the audience. So like they're not having any sort of interaction. They're not even like a lot of times talking to them, or my dad would always complain, like, for the jazz musicians that don't name the tune. Like, he's like, how am I supposed to know what it is if you don't tell me what the name of that song is? Like, and it's, especially with jazz where, the melody can change and all of these things. That's really what you're kind of hitting on.
Well, I also think that especially for younger people who may not have the confidence, sometimes a lot of that is a confidence issue, where you feel like you may not be. I mean, being on stage can be very uncomfortable. I mean, it really is, depending on the situation. But one thing that really changed for me was somebody who told me this, that really like made a big change in the way that I look at when I'm on a doing a show or performance, and especially if it's a new situation where I haven't experienced this particular thing and I'm nervous. That person told me that, you sit down, and you know this because you go to concerts as well. When you sit down in a seat at a concert hall or a club or a jazz festival, wherever it is, you're not looking like this going, your default is not, "I hate you," before the person comes out to play. You're not sitting there going, "Impress me." You're saying, I'm ready to love you. I'm ready to just want to tell all my friends and scream that I saw you and I was so impressed. Like that's the way most people come to a show. They're not coming thinking that they're gonna hate it.
Mm-hmm.
But the performer on stage, and this has happened to me so many times, you walk out and the first thing you say, they hate me. And you spend the whole time you're set thinking, I've got to figure out a way to get them not to hate me, as opposed to they already love me. So I'm like just going to take that love and build upon that. It's a real mindset difference, and it really changed the course of my actually made me love performing, where before that I really didn't love it that much because it just was shrouded in all this negativity. And this allowed me to turn that whole thing around into a very positive experience.